It's not solely on the system. The parents got to step up as well and make sure your kid is doing good in school and keep them on the right track, because that is the only way you can stop them from becoming another statistic.
Can you just describe briefly what your experiences were growing up in
Yeah.
the hood?
Basically, it wasn't, poverty is really bad in the hoods because a lot of people rely on government assistance because there's no jobs for African Americans in the hoods. Yes, there's jobs in terms of, minimum wage, but there's not jobs really there to get people out of poverty. So they turn to crime. And the problem with that is it plagues the community further, because when the crime rates go up, people are scared to go outside. I mean, you can't even walk down the street anymore in the hoods a lot of times without having a gun, because you don't know if you're going to get robbed, stabbed, shot up, whatever, because that's just the mentality that's been driven into us. So, yeah, I mean, you got people literally, drugs are a bad problem. You got people slaying out on crack cocaine, people hooked up on heroin. I mean, it's bad. And, the drive-bys, the shootings, people robbing, armed robberies, people robbing the grocery stores, robbing the gas stations, beating each other up, gang violence, police brutality is a problem. I'm not going to deny that either. But I think a lot of people are not owning up to accountability to some degree, because it's not all just on police. It's not all on the white man. Some of it's us, our fault as well. But the problem I have with people on the right is they seem to think that it's all on us, and that's not true. But
Okay.
there's a
So,
lot of problems in the hood that need to be fixed.
mm, so from what you just described, would I be correct to say that that kind of behavior, people robbing and all that, would I be correct to say that it's simply trying to survive in a tough and a harsh
Yes,
environment?
it's a poverty environment that people have no choice, because if they don't rob, steal, do what they got to do, their kids might go hungry or something else, and that's why it's a problem, and people's not addressing the problem. That's the problem.
So, looking at that situation, the rights would say something like, pull yourself up the bootstrap. I don't know if
Yeah,
I'm saying that correctly.
yeah, pull
The right to
yourselves up
say
by the
that.
bootstrap. Yeah.
Yeah. What is wrong with that statement by the
Well,
rights?
what's wrong with that statement is a few things. The black community in the poverty-stricken areas in the hood has some of the highest dropout rates in the country. They don't even finish high school a lot of the times. And then on top of it, the mom and dad household, the nuclear family, is highly deconstructed due to black males being the main premise for lockups in the hood. And then after that, you've got welfare queens, women that are incentivized to have kids with dudes they know are no good so they can get welfare government benefits. And this has all, in my opinion, been systemically built to oppress the black community, because every part of it is designed to keep us down. It's not solely on the system itself, because we are also driving it by continuing to do some of the dumb things we're doing. But there's a lot of problems with it because there's no education. The education is bad unless you get out the hood, and then the mentality of, oh, I got to get out the hood so I can have a better life. That shouldn't be what it is either. Instead of trying to escape the hood, we need to fix the hood, because if everybody is leaving the hood is never going to improve. It's never going to get better. So we need to work on what's going on in the hoods and stop just saying, I got to get out of here.
So when the right says that, pull yourself up the bootstraps and all that, are you trying to tell me that there is nothing within the powers of these communities? There's nothing that people within these communities can do by themselves to pull
Yes,
themselves
there
out
is.
of that kind of condition?
The one thing we can do right off the bat is immediately start calling out the bad people, the ones that are doing the crimes, because doing that by itself is going to show people, because it's unfortunate, but a lot of Americans think we're dumb in the hood. They think we're nothing but gangbangers, drug dealers, thugs. And the stereotype, it's not completely true, because not everybody in the hood is like that. But there is things we can do. We can come together instead of, constantly wanting to fight each other and gang banging, the gangs, the different turfs, the sets that run through these hoods. We can stop that stuff. We can do it at any time. But the problem is the education is not there to show kids there's another way besides this system that's been built. If the fathers and mothers had the education to take care of their kids properly and show them there's a different way, I think that would be a big step we could do, and then we can go from there. But it's got to start in the house because these
Okay,
kids
so
grow up with no education.
okay, let's talk about education. Who is responsible for education in the Black communities, and what is the level of education that is prevalent there? What's the source of funding for the education, and what's the rates of participation in education in the Black community, at least where you grew up in?
Yeah, here, if I remember correctly, granted, it's been a couple years since I graduated, but I believe back in 2014 when I graduated, I believe the dropout rate was like 56% in high school. It might be a little bit less now that there's been a little bit of change, but the problem is a lot of them get in trouble too, right? That's what happens because people sell drugs at school. Then they go to alternative schools, they go to juvenile hall and stuff, and it just slowly, gradually ruins their life because of the criminal mentality. Once you get in trouble once, odds are you're getting in trouble again. That's why there needs to be better systems in place, better funding to these schools. But the problem is we can't get the funding because of the education being so low. How they fund schools is normally based off how the students are doing. The higher the grades they're getting, the more funding that school gets because a lot of people want to go to that school. A lot of kids in the hood, they have the smarts. It's just they don't have the structure around them to get the grades they need to go to good colleges, universities, and get out of the mentality of, I'm no better than what the streets is telling me. Because
So
one of the prominent things, Kat or Charles, was I'm gonna die for this stuff. Like I'll die for the hood. Like why is that the mentality? Why isn't it let's rebuild this? That's the mentality, the violent, hostile mentality of I'll die for this.
you mean to say that the Black schools or the schools in the Black communities are not being funded properly, so the
Yes.
children are not getting quality education?
Yes. That's one of the biggest problems because if you take for example, let's take Richmond High, for example, in California. That school is nowhere near as good as one of these public schools, in rich white neighborhoods. Say, for example, something like whatever high school is in Beverly Hills. For a fact that school is getting way better funding than that school in Richmond over in California. And the reason for that is because the dropout rate is so high that the students aren't getting the education. Therefore, the school's funding is never going to increase because schools are funded by the state, I believe, based off how they perform academically.
Is this sort of an indictment on the position of the right, which says that African Americans are just not cutting it? They're not doing so well in the schools. They're not as competitive as maybe the Asian or the white kids. Would you say that is an indictment on them, that is because they're not getting proper education, or the structures for education in their communities are not as good? That's why that
Yes,
level of
that's
performance
a
is like that.
big part of it because without the funding, they can't hire better teachers. Without better teachers, you can't get quality education to these kids. And then you got the problem as well because these kids already, are in the wrong frame of mind. So on top of that, they go to these schools and they don't care about schools. All they care about is, hanging out with their boys and doing this and that. And then their grades start slumping. And then the parents, ain't keeping an eye on their kids' grades. They're not going to the, teacher conferences. They're not keeping track of their kids, make sure their kids are doing good. And that's why I'm saying it's not solely on the system. The parents got to step up as well and make sure your kid is doing good in school and keep them on the right track because that is the only way you can stop them from becoming another statistic. Because a lot of kids just don't have the mentality to escape that environment without their parents being there because when the parents ain't around, statistically saying you are I think it's like 8 times, maybe higher than that, more likely to go to prison than you are to college when your parents ain't in your life.